all actions have consequences, as everything we do in this world affects something in some way, and sometimes these consequences can take a shape much greater than what we were expecting. This is especially true in the world of Chainsaw Man, as due to the nature of devils, careless actions can quickly snowball into destructive consequences. And we can see this firsthand when Denji's own consequences take shape in the sheltered syndicate sideburn scions symbiotically seeking a slice of skewered satisfaction and secretly is supported by a sinister snake, Samurai Sword, or Katana Man, and his partner, Akane Sawatari.
Oh.
Now, this video contains spoilers for Chainsaw Man up until the end of the final arc of Part 1, so if you want to avoid spoilers, you have been warned. Katana Man and Akane Sawatari are both equally the arc antagonists of the Katana Man arc in Chainsaw Man, and it is with their introduction that the story ultimately changes the course in which it would continue, as they play very well into the themes of consequences, with Katana Man only existing because of Denji's own actions in the first chapter. As well, they bring into perspective the power and reach of the Gun Devil, who was just introduced a few chapters prior to their debut. As well, they fit perfectly into the grander narrative of the story, with them both simply being pieces unknowingly playing out a grander scheme that neither of them were aware of. Though, before we discuss that any deeper, let's first understand the meaning behind both their names and designs. Starting first with the titular hybrid himself, Samurai Sword. No, like, that's literally the only official name we actually have for him as of this video's release, as Samurai Sword has never been given a proper name in the series itself, and this is really just a code name based off the devil who he received the heart of, that being the Katana Devil, hence why he is called Samurai Sword. Though, he does have a much more popular fan name, this of course being Katana Man, and I will henceforth be using this name throughout a majority of the video, but let it be known it is not his actual official name. Now, visually I feel like Katana Man's human appearance might actually be slightly inspired by the FLCL character Commander Amaro, an agent of the Bureau of Interstellar Immigration who tries to act as Naota's own mentor while also holding a grudge against Haruko. I specifically feel it in the use of the character's sideburns in their design, as it allows the creators to sow an element of inexperience and immaturity into their characters without directly saying it. And we can see this very clearly in Amaro's own character, as he's very childish while being an adult, where Katana Man is the grandson of a Yakuza leader who was only given his position of power because his grandfather died, and he's rather inexperienced in the role. As well, both characters work as sort of a narrative foil to their leads, with Amaro being suggested that he is a Naota who Haruko abandoned long ago, and Katana Man is the opposite of Denji, as he is someone who grew up with food, shelter, and family to rely on. Also, interestingly enough, Amaro first appears in the 4th episode of Fooly Cooly, which one of the focuses of that episode is a plot point involving Naota's own jealousy over his father and Haruko's connection, which ultimately results in a moment that appears like Naota strikes his father with a baseball bat and supposedly kills him. And while this is a fake out and Naota actually struck a robotic mannequin of his father, all of it seems to be referenced in Denji's own backstory, with him striking and killing his actual father, and others making it out to be a suicide. And Denji represses what happens in a similar way to what Naota did, though it is this action in Denji's past that retroactively leads to Katana Man's own arrival in a similar way to Amaro picking up Naota for questioning after he assaulted his father. And all this referencing back to FLCL makes sense because Fujimoto has stated in the past that Fooly Cooly is one of the main inspirations for Chainsaw Man as a whole, though the design of his Katana Man form seems to take inspiration from a few different places. Firstly, like most hybrids in the series, the face of the Katana Man seems to be in reference to the iguana transformations from Abara, a series which Fujimoto has also claimed is a heavy inspiration for Chainsaw Man, though following this is the most obvious design influence for his devil design, and that of course is Hellboy and the Nazi scientist turned immortal clockwork assassin Karl Ruprecht Cronin. We can see the resemblance not only in their dual blade fighting style, but also in the general uniform officer look that the Katana Man has during their arc. As well, Katana Man's first attack at the ramen shop resembles Cronin's own introduction, with him opening up by firing his gun at his attackers and then ultimately having to switch to his dual blade attacks. As well, Del Toro's movie original backstory for Cronin matches up very well with Katana Man's, with them both coming from higher upper class families, with Cronin being a musical prodigy who used to tour before he hit puberty, and Katana Man being raised in a wealthy family thanks to his grandfather's work in the Yakuza, who also allowed him to obtain a refined palate. Though most important, it is how both characters' supernatural abilities come from their hearts, with Cronin having a mechanical wind-up heart, where Katana Man obviously has the Katana Devil's heart. Though, to fully transform into the Katana Man, Samurai Sword needs to remove his left hand to reveal a hidden blade beneath, which in itself is likely a reference to another series, that being Dororo by the famous Osamu Tezuka, and more specifically its lead character Hyakkimaru, who is a traveling ronin with a stolen body who had replaced his limbs with mannequin parts. One of these false limbs is his arms, which can be removed to reveal a hidden katana beneath, in a similar fashion to how Katana Man's arm is removed. What also helps reinforce this connection is around the time that Chainsaw Man had begun its run, Dororo had been recently picked up for a reinterpretation called Dororo and Hakimaru Den in 2018, alongside a new TV anime in 2019, so it had re-entered the cultural subconscious. Now, the power he obtained from the Katana Devil transformation, outside of the natural superhuman strength, speed, regeneration, and basic immortality, is a unique slash and dash attack, where Katana Man crouches down in a position that mimics a swordsman reaching for the blade at their waist, with the left hand acting as the katana and the right hand moving in a position to draw it. Then he dashes forward faster than can be seen and slashes anything in his path. The attack itself does require a lot of focus though, and tends to strike a single area of the body, but it does so with significant force, easily severing an unarmored body in half, or removing a devil's limb. Katana Man can even use this multiple times in a row without seeing any lasting side effects from it. Also, the first time we see dash and slash used, Fujimoto drew it specifically in a way to reference one of his idols in manga, Hiroaki Samura, in his work Blade of the Immortals, which is a series he has also referenced in the past with Fire Punch as well. Now, the mechanics of his attack are based on the practice of Aijutsu, or quick draw technique, which is a common trope used by most samurai-inspired characters or tied to katana-based weapons. Though Katana Man's attack doesn't actually make him invulnerable. Instead, it relies solely on outspeeding the pace of his target's reaction time, meaning that this strike is actually able to be blocked if the person sees it coming, and it can even be counterattacked, especially if the attention of the strike is redirected somewhere else. Now, the reason Samurai Sword was likely given the Katana Devil's Heart might have something to do with his own relation to the Yakuza, and their own history with samurais back in the 17th century. As for those who don't know, the Yakuza has two understood points of origin. First, of course, is the gambling and grifters who helped create the name Yakuza with their game of Oicho Kabu, a game which is very similar to Baccarat, where a player is trying to make a 9 out of the hand they are dealt and beat the dealer. In this, you are dealt a number of cards, and then you add them up, and if the total is over 9, that means you take the last digit of whatever the combined number is. For example, if your hand is equivalent to 17, that means you have pulled a 7. The worst possible hand to be dealt in this game is 8, 9, and then 3, as this would equal out to 20 and your score would become 0. And these numbers in that order could also be read as Yakuza, and that essentially means good for nothing. Thus, these gamblers and grifters would be equated with the name. The other origin is that they were formed from bands of ronin who either turned to banditry or became vigilante security forces for smaller villages to protect them from those aforementioned bandit gangs. Eventually, these two factions mixed together, the grifter and the ronin, and became a much bigger family, with them all taking blood oaths with each other and eventually adopting samurai practices and rituals, which include punishments that were meant to weaken members' own usefulness at either swords or card tricks. And with that understood, you can see how the Yakuza is actually rather closely connected with katanas and even samurais, hence why Fujimoto would likely give the grandson of a high-ranking Yakuza an ability like the Katana Devil. Though he didn't discover the Katana Devil's Heart on his own, own. Instead, it was delivered and transplanted into him by his partner, Akane Sawatari, a former civilian-side devil hunter turned gun devil contract broker. She came to the Yakuza with one goal in mind, to take the Chainsaw Man's heart and deliver it to the gun devil. Though before we get too into that, let's understand the meaning behind her name and design. Akane Sawatari's name is rather interesting, so let's start first with her family name, Sawatari, which is comprised of the characters for marsh and swamp and to deliver or fairy, though the Sa in Sawatari could also be read as to give blessing, so her name could be understood as someone who delivers blessings. And this fits with her role in the story, as not only is she able to broker guns to the Yakuza, which is a tool considered incredibly rare, but also she implanted the Katana Devil's heart into the Katana Man. Then we have her given name, Akane, which is rather common in Japan, and is written in the story using simplified characters, so there is no inherent meaning to the characters chosen, though Akane is harmonious with the word for deep red or vermilion, which is seemingly in relation to her design, with one of her most striking aspects being her bright red hoodie, which, speaking of her design, we also know that she is specifically wearing Nike's Air Max 97s, which is a cool way to date the series without specifically saying it takes place in 1997, while also allowing you to more accurately steal her look. And if we go even further into her design, one of the more eye-catching aspects of it is her snake-like eyes, with slit pupils, and is likely a proof of contract for her main devil employment, this being the Snake Devil. The Snake Devil, like most devils in Chainsaw Man, is an extremely rad design, being this massive serpent creature with a mouth comprised of interlocking arms and hands that house razor-sharp teeth that we can see peeking out the front lips. As well, it has a tiny red eyeball resting at the end of each of its jaws, which are shaped in a similar manner to Akane's own eyes. And the snake's power comes from man's natural fear of snakes, which has existed since the dawn of early man, as they were a normal predator in the wild. And over time, people have grown a natural fear of them, which some have overcome, but the fear of snakes is one of the most common fears among men. Along with this, its overwhelming size and abilities seem to be done in reference to one of the most common tropes in horror media, especially schlocky B-horror movies and games, this being the massive snake, one that attacks and devours its prey or swats them to death with their tail. Basically think any cheesy CGI slasher film like Anaconda or Snakes on a Train. Speaking of which, the Snake Devil also has a variety of different abilities that the contractor can call upon when fighting. One of the simpler of these is the Tail command, where Akane can control the tail of the Snake Devil's body and cause it to strike wherever she can see, which is likely why the contractor gains eyes to resemble the Snake Devil's own. Though this kind of attack is heavy and slow, meaning that it can be dodged by the more agile of targets. Though this type of a command is more the host commanding the devil's body to attack rather than any special new command, so it doesn't seem to come with any additional trade-offs. Sorta like how Himeno can control the Ghost Devil's hand freely after their initial contract. While the main benefit of the snake contract actually comes more from the most dangerous part of the snake, its mouth, as the contractor of the Snake Devil can trade part of their bodies to the snake. In return, it will swallow whatever the contractor asks it to. An example of one of these trades being when Akane called to consume the Ghost Devil. It costed her 4 of her fingernails on her left hand. Though, as I mentioned, this cost seems to depend on the strength of whatever the contractor is targeting with the snake, judging by how Akane had to assess her own hand after the fact to see exactly what she lost in the trade. And while this is a devastating ability, as it completely outmatches the Fox Devil's own similar attack, as well as a similar trade-off, it is not the most powerful aspect of the snake contract. That actually comes when you ask it to spit out whatever it's holding in its stomach. Now, the spit out command comes at an unclear cost to the contractor, as Akane's nose begins to bleed after she issues the command. Though, if I were to guess, I would assume that Akane needed to trade her sense of smell in one of her nostrils for this command, since it involves the Snake Devil's mouth and snakes can smell with their tongues. So, interesting correlation there, but that's not confirmed. Just my best guess. Either way, whatever is traded is hypothetically worth the reward, as whatever the Snake Devil spits out falls under the control of the contractor, seemingly free of charge, as Akane causes the snake to spit out the Ghost Devil and it follows her commands without requiring any form of a contractual cost. And with that said, I think it's very easy to see why an ability like this is so powerful. No wonder him and Verte have a very similar look to them. Now, you might wonder why Akane and Katana Man were made partners. Well, thematically, it might actually have something to do with a reference to a kami of the Shinto faith, this being the Yato Nokami, also known as the god of knight and swords, which eventually got reclassified into other media as simply a yokai. But they are described as blade-faced snake-like deities that not only bring death to those who see them, but also total familia extermination. They usually resided in the fields near the government offices of Namagata, and were considered to be incredibly dangerous. They were eventually defeated and had to be sealed within a shrine at a higher elevated segment of a mountain near the fields that they used to hide in. And it's due to these yokai that there exists a correlation between swords and snakes, and we can actually see elements of the Yato Nokami represented in the arc that these two debuted in. First, of course, Akane brought the Katana Devil Heart with her to the Yakuza. Where she got it, we'll get into in just a moment. But it is clear that she had it beforehand, and given the fact that she resembles how she looks when she has the Snake Devil in the photos we see of her brokering guns to the Yakuza, she likely had her snake contract at the time as well. This meant that the snake and the sword came together to the Yakuza. And with them working together, they directly led to the death of multiple government officials, these being the public safety devil hunters, which match the Yato Nokami's own habit of residing in government office fields. And then, of those killed, one of the most important was Aki's own buddy, Himino, who is someone that was originally created to be Aki's sister, so that ties into the familia extermination aspect of them. As well, Makima was able to cause the group to flee by going to a shrine at a higher elevation and slowly picking off their group one by one, which in turn caused the snake and sword to seal themselves away within a massive compound surrounded by zombies, similar in nature to the story of the Yato Nokami. Though, one point of interest I mentioned earlier is, where did Akane get the Katana Devil's Heart? Well, it's never actually stated in the series itself. We do know a few facts about the situation. Firstly, Akane is the one who brought it to the Yakuza. They didn't have it beforehand, even though they did peddle devil parts on the black market. Second, Akane had knowledge of how to create a hybrid, something that is considered extremely rare, so much so that the Public Safety Commission doesn't have a word for it. And finally, she was after the Chainsaw Devil's Heart for the Gun Devil. With all these facts understood, I think it's fair to assume that Akane received the Katana Devil's Heart alongside her Gun Devil contracts and Snake Devil from the Soviet Union, as the USSR is a reoccurring element in the main story of Chainsaw Man, being the only nation outside of Japan to seemingly possess knowledge of how to create a hybrid, given that they were able to do so with Reze. They also possess both pieces of the Gun Devil and a vested interest in the Chainsaw Devil's Heart, with both Reze and Santa Claus gunning for it. Akane was more or less used to gauge how difficult it would be to get the Chainsaw Devil's Heart. She even had aspects in her contract that specified that she'd be killed if she were to fail or be captured in order to keep this operation a secret. So I think it's clear as day that the USSR is the only group who could have possibly given Akane the tools she needed to pull this off. And this is exactly the type of cover-up that Makima wants you to believe. As when we look at all the details surrounding Akane, Katana Man, and the Yakuza, we see that everyone involved was simply a pawn in Makima's hand in order to expand her own influence, but also find a way to drag Denji's past into his new life. So we'll start first with this. Akane is absolutely shown to have made a contract with Makima at some point in the past. Whether she was aware of it or not is unclear. This is because Makima is able to perform an ante-mortem contract activation with her body in a similar way to what she does with Aki. We also know that Makima can conduct contracts through other people's bodies, so it's likely that when Akane was reached out to by the Gun Devil, it was actually Makima playing that role. And this is all but confirmed later when we learn that the guns used to kill Himino and the other Tokyo Devil Hunters weren't Gun Devil creations like Akane thought they were, but in fact were illegally man-made guns. Yet Makima, who was prevalent to that information at the time, still suggests that Akane's contract with the gun devil was specifically what led to her involuntary suicide upon capture, when this is more likely Makima's own doing to allow her to gain access to the Snake Devil's power without ever having to form a contract with it on her own. She is also likely the one who provided Akane with the Katana Devil's heart, and taught her how to create a hybrid. This way, she could create a host for one of the weapon devils that Makima fought alongside with during their battle against the Chainsaw Devil long ago in Hell. And the reason she selected the Yakuza is actually for a couple reasons. First, Makima had her eye on the Zombie Devil, something that was within their possession and she was trying to capture in the first chapter before Denji killed it. But also, she knew that they'd be willing to accept the guns provided by Akane and not ask too many questions of where they came from. But more importantly, she also selected them because after meeting Denji, she looked into his past and found a relation to the Yakuza. And as it would turn out, there was a perfect candidate for a devil heart. Resting within the same Yakuza family that had caused Denji so much grief as a kid was a grieving boy who was out for revenge. Thus, she moved to empower him in a way that tested the Chainsaw Devil, while also creating an easy target she could brainwash if they failed, which we actually see her do in the final arc of the manga, as she assembles the Special Division 5, which, speaking of, as one of the biggest results of this whole incident was it created a massive power vacuum for Makima to swoop in and fill, as with the death of almost every human agent in the Tokyo Division, it called for all Tokyo Devil hunting Special Division teams to be fused together with Division 4, and it also put Makima in full control of the Special Division operations. Akane and Katana Man were essentially tools used to further the control of the Control Devil, though thematically, Katana Man also exists to call into question Denji's own morality and his humanity in a way, as Himeno's death, alongside Katana Man's own prodding, causes Denji to question his own ability to feel emotions in the following arcs. As well, their assault is done to set the bar for fights to come, as Katana Man and Akane are the ones to hand the protagonists their first real loss, with their plans only really failing because of Makima's own intervention. As well, they were perfectly created to get the reader to want to see them taken down, either in Katana Man's own relation to Denji's past and how he insists that Denji must have loved his debt-collecting abuser, someone who shifted all the blame of his father's actions onto him and then used him to make a profit. As well, Akane nullified the sacrifice of both Aki, who reduced his lifespan to a mere 2 years in an attempt to defeat the Katana Man, only to have her simply revive him when he died, and Himeno's sacrifice, who gave up the remainder of her body to overwhelm the Katana Man, only to have Akane come in and simply eat the Ghost Devil and use it as a tool in the rematch against Aki later on. Katana Man also exists as a perfect foil to Denji's character, as I've mentioned before, him being this coddled child since birth who is given everything that he could ever want, from fancy food to establishing a refined palate and talking down to Denji because he is unrefined, while Denji lived off scraps and worked to pay off a debt which likely funded the Katana Man's own blessed life. He was reaping the rewards off of Denji's own hard work before they even knew each other, all the while living a life that Denji couldn't even dream of. We even see a drastic difference in their lives referenced in their hybrid devil designs, with the Katana Man being much more clean-cut, matching his higher-class upbringing, dressed in an officer's uniform and even having razor-sharp teeth lined perfectly in a straight fashion, with the edges even mirroring the tips of swords. Where Denji's Chainsaw Man form is a crude mixture of man and machine that looks rough to the touch, as well as these crooked sharp teeth which match the teeth on the tread of a chainsaw. As well, the way they fight is completely different, with Denji focusing on murderizing his opponent and shredding and ripping them apart with his basic attacks, where Katana Man's attacks tend to focus on single slashes which do serious damage. And their role as these foils to our leads makes their defeat all the more sweeter, with Fujimoto even using these moments as a great way to grow the bond between Aki and Denji, as they proceed to kick the Katana Man in the nuts together and see who can get him to scream the loudest, which, funny enough, is directly in reference to Hunter x Hunter and Chrollo's Requiem. Honestly, these two are incredibly well done standout villains, who help paint a greater picture of the interweaving webs of the main story of Chainsaw Man, especially when you dive deeper into their roles in it, and I'm excited to see them animated later this year, as the little teaser we got of them in the anime PV was just enough to get me excited for any extra content that MAPPA might add to the anime featuring them. I just hope that Katana Man doesn't magically get a name in the coming months, leaving this video forever unfinished. Oh, that'd be really embarrassing. And with that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to help support more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to create a partnership that rivals The Snake and the Sword, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Don't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.